Hello and welcome to the Indian Writers Forum. Today we have Romila Thapar with us. Romila, my first question to you is about the traditions of dissent that we've had in India. What were these traditions? And now there's a certain conception of India as intolerant of dissent. Historically, could you trace for us some of the traditions we've had of dissent in India?
Yeah, well, I think that's a terribly important question because in many ways there was a very strong tradition of dissent. Beginning, of course, with the whole controversy between what is referred to in the texts as Brahman and Shraman. And by Shraman, of course, is meant the Buddhists, the Jains, the Ajivakas, and all those that did not accept Vedic Brahmanism. And what did they not accept? They didn't accept that the Vedas were of divine origin. They didn't accept that there was such a thing as a soul that reincarnates after death, and so on. And basically, the emphasis was on what the Buddha often referred to as causality, cause. Now, causality is fundamental to rational thinking. You cannot have rational thinking unless you are committed to some sense of causality. And this tradition, where the Brahmanic tradition always referred to the Shramanic tradition as the Nastika, the non-believers, this tradition went on for centuries. And in fact, after all this, 500, 600, 700, 800 years later, we have this lovely description in the text of the grammarian Patanjali, who talks about the Brahmins and the Shramans and says that their relationship can be compared to that of the snake and the mongoose. So it's a pretty sharp relationship, and the basic question is logic and rationality on one side and belief in deity and the supernatural and divine causes on the other side. And this continues right the way through in text after text, whether it's Megasthenes who comes to the Mauryan period, to the Mauryan court, whether it is the Ashokan inscriptions that keep on talking about Brahmanam, Shamanam, again referring to this duality, right up to the time of Al-Biruni in the 11th century, who talks about the religion of the Brahmins, and then he says, but there is a counter-religion which is very strong, and they can't stand each other, and the counter-religion is that of the Samaniyas. And so this contestation between conservative thought and radical rational thought is something which is part of our tradition. It has continued all the way through. Therefore, to deny it is really like wiping out half of our philosophical tradition. And one of the reasons I think for this denial is precisely that the people who make this accusation that there was never a rational dissenting tradition are people who don't read philosophy. They know nothing about Indian philosophy. Because it's very clear and evident. I mean, the whole school of logic and the school of causation and so on, it's very, very clear. And then you get, in the medieval period, the various different religious and other ideological sects, in which again there is a great deal of difference of opinion. And some of that difference of opinion is really quite sharp. I mean, you have Kabir and you have Ravidas on the one hand, giving you one idea of what is meant by belief and religion and the values of ethical values of society, and you have others giving you other ideas. So the point is that in any sophisticated society, doesn't matter where in the world, there has to be a range of diverse opinions. Otherwise, you cannot have any kind of real departure, real philosophical departure. Philosophy is dependent on examining a variety of ways in which explanations of the world are sought. So today, to say that this rational tradition didn't exist is partly out of ignorance, and it's partly out of a political ideology that prefers everybody to conform to a certain kind of thinking, which is a thinking that has been invented in the modern period. I mean, what we are told about our tradition, I mean, I don't have to quote people like Eric Hobsbawm and Terence Ranger here, who've written tremendously on the invention of tradition. And I think that this is a terribly important idea, which historians have taken up and are investigating now quite widely, that traditions can be invented. So you can actually settle down and work out a whole tradition and claim it to have been something that belonged to the past. Now, to prove that claim, of course, you have to have evidence. And this is where the evidence of non-conformity doesn't exist. I mean, it doesn't, the non-conformity in terms of people not being in opposition to the conservative. We have so much evidence of opposition to the conservative that you cannot say that there was a tradition where there was no rational objection or no objection to orthodoxy or to conservative opinion.